The Story of an Hour. This story was first published on 1894 as The Dream of an Hour before being republished under this style in 1895. Chopin, its author. She was born on 1850 and death on 1904. She was an American writer best known for her stories about the inner lives of sensitive, daring women. Her novel, The Story of an Hour Awakening, and all her short stories are read today in countries around the world, and she is widely recognized as one of America's essential authors. When we talk about the story of an hour, we have its main protagonist, Lois Mallard. Lois Mallard was a woman whose husband was reportedly killed in a train accident. When Lois heard the news, she was secretly happy because she was now free. She was filled with a new lust for life, and although she usually loved her husband, she cherishes her newfound independence and even more. She had a heart attack when her husband arrived after all comes home. The other protagonists, Brentley Mallard. Who was he? He was Lois's husband, supposedly killed in a train accident. Although Lois remembered Brentley as a kind and loving man, merely being married to him also made him an oppressive factor in her life. Bradley arrived home unaware that there had been a train accident. Josephine. Josephine was Lois's sister. Josephine informed Lois about Bradley's death. Richard, Bradley's friend. Richard learned about the train accident and Bradley's death at the newspaper office, and he was there when Josephine told the news to Lois. The use of an omniscient third-person narrator enables Chopin to tell a complete story that's not limited to the protagonist's point of view. This is key because the opening of a story began with us readers knowing something Mrs. Mallard doesn't, and because the story ends after Mrs. Mallard has already died. Okay. How it began? Okay, Lois Mallard had heard the trouble, so she must be informed carefully about her husband's death. Her sister Josephine told her the news. Lois's husband, friend Richards, learned about the retired disaster when he was in the newspaper office and saw Lois's husband promptly on the list of those killed. Lois began sobbing when Josephine told her of Bradley's death and went upstairs to be alone in her room. Lois sat down and looked out an open window. She saw trees, smelled approaching rain, and heard a Peter yelling out what he's selling. She heard someone singing as well as the sounds of sparrows, and there are puffy white clouds in the sky. She was young, with lines around her eyes. Still crying, she gazed into the distance. She felt apprehensive and tried to suppress the bottling emotions within her, but can't. She began repeating the word free to herself over and over again. Her heart beat quickly, and she felt very warm. Lois knew she would cry again, and she saw Bradley's corpse. His hands were tender, and he always looked at her longingly. But then she imagined the years ahead, which belonged only to her now, and spread her arms out joyfully with anticipation. She will be free on her own without anyone to oppress her. She thought that all women and men oppressed one another even if they do it out of kindness. Louise knew that she often felt love for Bentley, but told herself that none of that matters anymore. She felt ecstatic with her newfound sense of independence. Josephine came to her door, beginning Lois to come out, warning her that she will get sick, and she doesn't. Lois told her to go away. She fantasized about all the days and years ahead and hoped that she will live a long life. Then she opened the door and she and Josephine started walking down the stairs where Richard is waiting. The front door unexpectedly opened and Brantley came in. He hadn't been in the train accident or even aware that one had happened. Josephine screamed, and Richard tried unsuccessfully to block Lois from seeing him. Doctors arrived and pronounced that Lois died of a heart attack brought on by happiness. The Story of an Hour is a short story written by Kate Chopin on April 19, 1894. Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour is written in a chronological order, but it is also organized into three moods denoted by Lois Muller's position on. First of all, the staircase upward. Second, in her bedroom. And third, her descent down the staircase. In The Story of an Hour, Chopin exploits specific structural and stylistic techniques to heighten the drama of the hour. The structure Chopin has chosen for The Story of an Hour fits the subject matter perfectly. The story is short, made up of a series of short paragraphs, many of which consist of just 2 or 3 sentences. Likewise, the story covers only 1 hour in Lois Muller's life, from the moment she learned of her husband's death to the moment he unexpectedly returns alive. The short, dense structure mirrors the intense hour Lois spent contemplating her new independence. Just as Lois is completely immersed in her wild thoughts, of the moment, we are immersed along with her in his brief period of time. This period can be read quickly, but the impact that it makes is powerful. Chopin surprises us first with Lois's elated reaction when she first murmurs "free" to herself. She shocks us again at the conclusion when she dies upon Brentford's return. The heart disease mentioned at the end of the story echoes the heart trouble discussed at the beginning, intensifying the twist ending and bringing the story of a satisfying close. Because such a short story leaves no room for background information, flashbacks, or excessive speculation, Chopin succeeds in making every sentence important by employing an almost poetic writing style. She uses repetition to highlight important points, such as when she repeats the word open throughout the story to emphasize the freedom of Lois's new life. She has Lois repeat the word free and over again as well, which is one of the few words Lois actually speaks aloud in the story and indicates how much she cherishes her newfound freedom. Besides repeating words, Chopin also repeats phrases and sentence structures to highlight important points. For example, Chopin writes, "She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday that she had thought with a shudder that life might be long." The identical phrasing of the second half of each sentence reveals how drastically Lois's life has changed. She once shuddered at the thought of a long life, but now she prays for it. Finally, Chopin makes the prose of a story beautiful by using alliteration and internal rhymes. For example, Josephine revealed it in half concealing when she tells Lois the news, and Brantley repairs composedly carrying his belongings. All the Chopin stylistic and structural techniques combine to make this very short story powerful. In Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour, irony is used as an effective literary device. Situational irony is used in The Story of an Hour, thought Mrs. Mallard's reaction to her husband's death and the description of the settings around her at this time. Here, Kate Chopin exposed these themes. First of all, the forbidden joy of independence. In The Story of an Hour, independence is a forbidden pleasure that can be imagined only privately. When Lois heard from Josephine and Richards of Brentford's death, she reacts with obvious grief, and although her reaction is perhaps more violent than other women's, it is an appropriate one. Alone, however, Lois begins to realize, and she is now an independent woman, a realization that enlivens and excites her. Even though these are her private thoughts, she at first tries to sketch the joy she feels, to beat it back with her will. Such resistance reveals how forbidden this pleasure really is. When she finally does acknowledge the joy, she feels possessed by it and must abandon herself to it as the word free escapes from her lips. Lois's life offers no refuge for this kind of joy, and the rest of society will never accept it or understand it. Extreme circumstances have given Lois a taste of this forbidden fruit, and her thoughts are, in turn, extreme. She sees her life as being absolutely hers, and her new independence as the core of her being overwhelmed. Lois even turns to prayer, hoping for a long life in which to enjoy this feeling. When Brentford returns, she unwittingly yanks Lois's independence away from her, putting it once again out of her reach. The forbidden joy disappears as quickly as it came, but the taste of it is enough to kill her. The other theme would be the inherent oppressiveness of marriages. Chopin suggests that all marriages, even the kindest ones, are inherently oppressive. Lois, who readily admits that her husband was kind and loving, nonetheless feels joy when she believes that he has died. Her reaction doesn't suggest any matiz, and Lois knows that she will cry at Brently's funeral. However, despite the love between husband and wife, Lois views Brently's death as a release from oppression. She never names a specific way in which Brently oppressed her, hinting instead that marriage in general stifles both women and men. She even seems to suggest that she oppressed Brently just as much as he oppressed her. Lois's effing a hammy, in which these thoughts paradise through her mind, reveals the inherent oppressiveness of all marriages, which by their nature rob people of their independence. The story of an hour independence is a forbidden pleasure that can be imagined only privately. Even though these are her private thoughts, she at first tries to sketch the joy she feels, to beat it back with her will. Such resistance reveals how forbidden this pleasure really is. The message of Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour is about a woman's desire for freedom from marriage and then thematically argues that oppression can ultimately be a killer. Chopin's most famous novel is The Awakening. I hope this story were like to you. Thanks a lot.